Hey everybody, it's Tom Frangione from the SiriusXM Beatles Channel here with Andy and Tom on Two Legs, my favorite Paul McCartney podcast.
Hello, gang, and welcome to episode number 272 of Two Legs. We are a weekly podcast / videocast dedicated to mainly the solo career of the one and only Sir Paul McCartney. My name is Andy Nichols, and I am one of your two co-hosts here on Two Legs. Joining me today is the co-founder, Mr. Tom Frangione. Hello, Tom.
Andy, my friend, I'm doing wonderful. Hope you're doing well as well. And great news that we get to report about a certain 45 that won a Grammy over the weekend. So we can talk about that for a few minutes, and very happy about that.
We will, and we will do that with our guest who we have on today. So as you see below, we are honored to have a very special guest on our show. And those of you that have a subscription to SiriusXM and listen to the Beatles Channel, you know this name, but maybe you've never seen his face before. But now you can in the flesh right here on our show. And welcome to Two Legs, Tom Frangione.
Yes, also known as the face that's made for radio.
Well, welcome, Tom, and it's long overdue to have you on too. Very long overdue. We know we've been trying to connect for a couple of years. We had Caitlin on some years ago, and now we finally got the man, Mr. SiriusXM Beatles Channel, on our channel. Hello, Tom.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. This is going to be a great deal of fun. I know it.
It will. And you have been the principal DJ on the Beatles Channel, which is Channel 18, since 2017, some 8 years ago almost now, and can be heard on many programs. Actually, I have forgotten to until you told me today, but that's you actually help produce Across the Universe. Yep. You do Way Beyond Compare, which is Rarities, which you handle solo. The Apple Jam Show with David Frick, who is a senior editor at Rolling Stone. Beyond the Beatles, and my personal favorite, the Fab Forum with Dennis Elsis and Bill Flanagan, heard on Wednesday nights live and repeated on Sundays. Wow. How do you have time for anything else?
When I get home from work, I go into the phone booth, put on my cape, break a date with Lois Lane, and just fly right on in, I guess. No, you know what? You find time for something that is a passion, as the Beatles obviously are for me. You find the time. So, it's not as hard as it seems. But yeah, it is a great time commitment. It's a lot of time. I mean, a lot of folks say, well, what? You go on and you know the Beatles Rarities, for example, you know them like the back of your hand. That's a half hour a week. No, this, as you guys know, production, prepping it, sequencing things, thinking of the points you want to make, scripting some notes, some bullet points you want to get in. And, that's on the ones that are, quote, the easy ones, because you don't have to bounce anything off anybody. If you ever saw some of the sauce, like David Frick, who I so much respect for. He's he's a brilliant guy. I often tell people it's like, doing a show with him is like playing tennis, right? They tell you how there's only one way to get better at playing tennis, and that's by playing with somebody better than you. Okay. And upping your game. David ups my game. He just does, because it's an inspiration to work with someone so well-spoken and so well-respected. So, doing Apple Jam, I probably put more time into preparing for that, not just picking songs and saying, well, should we focus on Badfinger this month, or is it a, all cover version show, or whatever we're going to do. It takes a lot because you want to be able to converse at that level with him. It takes a lot of prep. The Fab Forum, look, that's the longest running of the shows I do. That one's been on the air since the channel launched in May of 2017. Yep. And it's had a few different, we'll call it like, little shifts in theme. We used to say, here's what we're going to talk about tonight. The anniversary of this, the Grammys, Paul's best B-sides, and this, and then we'll have half an hour of calls and on we go. Then it was, we're going to have a guest. Then it was, we're going to have two guests. Then it was, we're going to have three guests. And those I mean, they're as much fun as you want to make
Oh,
them.
yeah.
And then the world almost blew up a couple years ago. So, we started doing the shows, a little bit differently. And then, now we're gravitating more as the audience has grown. And it's been 8 years. We want to do it pretty much all calls. Like the last few weeks, we've not had a guest. It's all calls and even a touch of what I call Cousin Brucey Saturday night. Some dedications. Hey, it's my wife's birthday. This is her favorite song. Can you send this one out to Janet? And great, we can do that.
Of course, cousins, we can play it right for you.
You bet you, cousin. Yeah. But so it's been more of that, and the thing is, the stories that people come up with are incredible because I think what makes the Fab Forum so cool, Andy and Tom, is you probably can't say this about any other band, right? Everybody has a Beatles story, okay? Even if it's, my next door neighbor is the biggest Beatle collector I've ever met in my life and has, the biggest record collection. Or, my brother took me to go see Wings when I was a kid, or everyone seems to have a Beatles story. Can you say that about, I don't know, Led Zeppelin? Does everybody have a Led Zeppelin story? I don't know, but everyone seems to have a Beatles story. So it keeps the calls coming, which is great. And the things that we hear are sometimes they're staggering. I mean, and particularly if it was from one of the, when we had guests.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple that just, if I live to be 1,000, I'll never forget, hearing them. I mean, one of ours, I'll share it with you. We had Ernie Isley on from the Isley Brothers, and talking about, how he first heard the Beatles, and, they heard they had covered Twist and Shout and were doing Shout in their thing. And they were going to be coming over and guess what? Do the Ed Sullivan Show. And, this is when he first saw them like everybody else. Okay, so far it's very believable. And he says, and you'll appreciate this as a Jersey guy, Andy, because the Isleys hail from Bergen County.
That's right.
And he says, yeah, so the band was, on a break. So, everybody was at our house to watch it. And I'm sitting on the couch with Jimmy, and we're watching the Beatles on Sullivan. I say, whoa, wait a minute. Jimmy. Yeah, who was the lead guitar player in the Isleys touring band? Jimi Hendrix. Okay, so you watched the Beatles on Sullivan with Jimi Hendrix. I got nothing. Okay,
right. Where do you go from there?
I can't top that story. I just can't. We get them like that all the time, and we had Dwayne Eddy on one time, and he was talking about trading a guitar with another, musician. He said, yeah, so I turned, Buddy always liked that guitar. And he told me he wanted, I said, wait a minute, how many people in your life you ever meet that knew Buddy Holly to start with?
Right.
I mean, it's staggering. I mean, we're going on, May will be 8 years. So we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 shows.
Wow.
And it's, as you hear it, it changes week to week. Right now, it's all call. I mean, because
it's call, and you know what? It's so great. It's that it's a live show. It's a live call-in show. It's not pre-recorded. It's a live show with real calls and real people and real stories. And that's one of the greatest
moment. Yeah,
and that's one of the best things about it, because anything can be pre-recorded and put it, but you do a live show with two other people taking calls from all over the country, with everybody sharing a Beatles story from California to New York, all ages, first generation to kids. And that's awesome.
Yeah, we get them where it's, and our callers, we have a board, like everybody does, and it says, on line 1, and he wants to talk about going to Manchester to see Paul McCartney. Okay, well, we'll take that call, right? Line 2, my granddaughter learned how to sing Yellow Submarine for the school pageant. Okay, that's going to be a little bit of a different call, but if the granddaughter at 8 years old is there and is going to talk about that,
sure,
it just adds a lot of flavor to the to it. It gets more dynamic that way, as you say, because hearing even this week, the big anniversary, Sullivan, of course,
sure,
hearing 30 callers all say, I remember seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. How many ways is that story going to end? I mean, unless they watch it
Right.
with Jimi Hendrix, right?
Right.
But you want to have a lot of variety and look at someone who anything from the 8-year-old kid who just learned how to sing Yellow Sub for the school pageant into someone who's I don't know they're learning to play guitar and are studying Beatles music to anything to somebody who's an avid vinyl collector and found some really they found a Butcher cover at a garage sale for 25 cents or something. We hear everything. We hear them all.
It's been a great 8 years, and I always just kind of remember the launch of the channel almost nearly coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the Pepper Box because it was so hand in hand, and
Well,
like a Beatles channel, and we're getting a Pepper Box set. Like what?
well, I got to tell you, our very first show, right? We're in the studio, and we've done our whatever you want to call live auditions or dress rehearsals, whatever you want to call them, in the weeks leading up to it. So it's first show. Okay, it's the first show, and we're there with our program. Everybody's there. The program director, our VP, everybody, and Jeff Jones came in from Apple with a few gift boxes and said, "Here," and that's what he gave us was the Sergeant Pepper box set, which it was coming out in
June.
A week. Yeah, I mean, we're talking like third week of May, so it was a week or two ahead. And he said, "Crack it open and play one or two things." Obviously, we didn't have the chance to even preview it, so it was like, "Oh, it says here, good morning, take 43 without the horns or something," and it's like that might be worth playing. Oh, you think? So that first night, even we were prepared for either getting a lot of calls, getting no calls, getting some calls, but we had to be talking about something. And man, if a brand new Sergeant Pepper box wasn't going to get it going, what would? And Jeff, he was just such a champion and supporter of the channel. It was funny because he, after he gave us that, he said, I'm just going to be in the corner. Don't mind me. I mean, that's like going on your honeymoon and your mother says, I'll just be in the corner.
Right.
Make like I'm not here, But
not only do you got this wonderful box set to talk about, but you got one of the men responsible for putting it out, sitting in the corner, making sure you do a good job of it.
Right, for not just for putting that out, but for putting this channel on the air.
Right.
So,
Yes.
No pressure. But no, fortunately, we got out of the gate strong. And, as I say, the show has gone through a couple of different style shifts, if you will. And that's what keeps it fresh.
It does, and again, it'll be 8 years in a few months, which is absolutely crazy to think about. And through those 8 years, there's been new people added on. There's been new shows. There's been a lot of different variety as the channel's grown. But one of the biggest scores, I have to think, was in 2022 when you interviewed the man.
Yeah. I went home that night and made a list of days in my life that sucked. And the first one was not today. That was extra special. We're talking about the day I got to spend some time with Paul McCartney. Okay, that's enough of a sentence right there.
Great sentence right there.
Finish the sentence with, I get to spend time with Paul McCartney talking about one subject, my favorite Paul McCartney album. Okay, that's going to up that ante a little bit. And I mean, we get guests on the Fab Forum. I mean, we've had some names. I mean, Pete Townsend, Billy Joel. I mean, and it goes on from there. But Paul, that's a little special. Now, I had interviewed Ringo one-on-one, but on Zoom. It was smack in the middle of COVID.
Right.
He was 3,000 miles away, but it was very casual, much like we're doing here, about one particular album, Stop and Smell the Roses. And we had a grand old time. And that interview went really well, and we played it on the Fab Forum and, used little snippets of it to introduce songs that he was talking about. We can always recycle those bits. Come 2022, the 40th anniversary of my favorite, not just of Paul's albums, but of all solo Beatles albums, Tug of War, was coming up on an anniversary. And we present them. I don't. Our VP and our brass do this. And, work very, very closely with Apple and say, here are some things that we'd like to do this year. An anniversary of this. We're thinking of launching this new show, whatever it might be. And Apple, of course, as a partner, will say, well, here's what we have lined up. We're going to, see what you can build around this. And it's very interactive. It being the 40th anniversary of Tug of War, I mean, every year's some anniversary of some album.
Right.
I have this, I don't know, maybe it's wishful thinking. I don't know. I think that as much as Paul would say and did say in the interview, when I say, where do you place this among all of them? You're going to get that. Oh, it's like trying to pick your favorite child, right?
Right.
If you look at the history of even how he's treated this in reissues, right? The 93 series, any album that had an unreleased or rather a non-LP B-side or an alternate version or a 12-inch or whatever, all got added as bonus tracks, even Band on the Run, by the way.
Right.
Okay. Where he put Country Dreamer at the end because it was the big side of Hell on Wheels. Okay, so you get the big crescendo of 1985, and then then you're getting Country Dreamer and stuff. It was like a little bit weird. That one, which had B-sides like I'll Give You a Ring and Rain Clouds, and the solo version of
Ebony and Ivory, and Nothing. Nothing.
You know why? Because that one is good just as it is.
Right.
And in 2000, I guess
2015, the remix.
The archive.
The archive series. He gets personally involved in that one and he supervises the remix.
The only remix
to
date. The only one.
Yes. Somehow I sensed it, in the interview that this record holds some unique place for him. And again, it's a very pivotal point in his life. One, it's the first record that he makes after John is taken from us. All eyes are going to be on him. No question. He's turning 40. That's kind of a big deal anyway, right?
Right.
And what he does, at some point, and we talked about this in the interview, he has to decide that this is not going to be a Wings album.
Right.
He's got Jeff Emmerich back behind the board. He's got George Martin there. And guess what? For the first time on a Paul McCartney record, an ex-Beatle. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's doing songs in tribute to another ex-Beatle. This is a big deal. Okay? It is a very big deal. And that came across in the interview. I'm hoping a lot of your listenership and viewership has had a chance to hear it on Sirius. We'll haul it out around his birthday and things. And what we did is we took the interview, which lasted an hour, and then cut that up. There were some general questions up top and general questions at the back, but in between it was track by track.
Right.
And we got, and he'd say, and this is what I remember about.
So in other words, you didn't play the songs with him and listen to them in time.
No. I had they allotted me 1 hour it was one-on-one. To the point where our engineer wasn't even allowed in the room. The wires had to be run outside.
So this was at the studio.
No, it was actually held at his offices in New York City.
Okay.
Oh.
So I get there. Again, we're in the middle of COVID. They said, please bring evidence of a shot, whatever. But he wanted it one-on-one. None of his team was in the office, not a manager, not a publicist, not anybody. None of our team was there. It was two guys talking. The way they explained it is he prefers that these things be like a conversation rather than an interrogation. I said, well, that's good, because that's what you want it to come across as. I mean, it's going to be a Q&A, but you're not going to get into making it, as you say, an interrogation. It has to be conversational.
So Tom, talk about, when you finally get the okay, this is going to happen. Talk about your feelings and just just talk about that for a minute.
All right, the lead up to it, right? So as I say, our team and the Apple team exchange ideas, and I asked that this be put on the list for a specific reason. Yeah,
right.
I put this one on the list. they came back and said, he's into it. He'll do it. But and this is at the beginning of the year. You need to wait till the tour is over, right? He was still touring throughout the spring and in
right, because this was done at the end of 2022, right?
In September, yeah. So
fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Right.
So tour is over. They said, because that's what he's focused on. He's not gonna, he's got enough on his plate. So had to wait until the tour was over. We got it back on the agenda and said, you pick the time and place, being here in New Jersey, if it meant going out to, to the Hamptons, well, so be it. If it meant New York, it meant New York. Hey, if he was going to be at Nancy's,
I'll drop what I'm doing. Don't worry about that.
No problem.
Right. Over by Nancy's family, it's 10 minutes from here,
Yes, her family's not far from here.
So anyway, they called and said, he's got some time on such and such a date. Fine, I'll avail myself of that, no problem. Where would it be? New York City, that's a 30-minute train ride for me. It's no big deal. Leaving nothing to chance. The interview was for 2:00. I got in a little early, like 8:30 in the morning.
I was gonna say, what time did you get in at 7 a.m.?
7 a.m.
Our studios are about a 6-block walk from there, so I found a place to make myself, invisible and
like mentally prepare yourself for like,
and not say, oh my God, the train is 10 minutes late. I'm gonna blow this interview.
No, of course.
Right. So got there. Actually, I got to tell you this one story leading up to it. It's coming up in a couple of weeks, and the next thing I see on the news is that the Queen died.
Right.
Wow, that's terrible. And they said, yes, now England will have a 10-day mourning period and then the funeral.
Oh, shoot.
Start counting. Boom, 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 boom. Guess what day 10 is? The funeral. Guess what day that falls on? The
interview. The day of the interview.
90-something years old. This is the week. I'm losing all perspective here, right? But turns out he didn't go to the funeral, obviously, as you know.
Right.
So we asked, like a week before, like, hey, anything, are we still good for next Monday or whatever? Yeah, no, he'll be here. Okay, great. It was at that point they asked, look, just to make sure that the conversation keeps flowing and he's fully prepared, can you send over an outline of what you want to talk about? Right. That doesn't have to be the specific questions, but kind of how the rhythm of it would be, and just so that in case something sparks a memory or a story, it'll enhance the whole thing. Of course. Right. They said, can you do that in the next 2-3 days? I said, I've had this thing in my head for 40 years. I can say
I've been ready for it for years.
I can give it to you in 10 minutes.
Right.
So sent that over, and to whatever extent he perused it, it worked, because there was nothing. My biggest fear, guys, was we'd get to any song on the album, pick one. What's that you're doing?
Right.
And his answer would be, I bang that out in 10 minutes. Go to the next one. No. I got an hour. I want to hear stories. Right.
Right.
So I prepared, for myself, as I say, some general questions up front, general questions at the back, and the track by track, if there was something specific. So I had backups ready for all of them, just in case he made short work. But thankfully, and I've used this line, I'm glad Lisa's not in the room because she's only heard this line 1,000 times. Make a list of good adjectives. He checked every box. He was funny. He was smart. He was engaging. He was engaged. He was insightful. You name every good adjective you want your guy to be, he hit every box. It really was just a delightful hour with him. It was great. I got there when they brought him in to say hi. Right. They introduced me to him. They don't have to introduce him to me. I'm kind of supposed to know who he is. Right. But we're shaking hands, and I got kind of that look of like, have we met before? Like, do I know you? And I said, yeah, I'm on the Beatles Channel. I said, but yeah, we had last met. It was actually right before COVID at the Abbey Road anniversary in London. And of course, I'll add one more adjective, polite. He says, "Oh, of course, Tom." Yep. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
He's being polite, and I'm okay with that. But it served as um, a great setup because I said, yeah, in fact, that night, my girlfriend Lisa and your wife Nancy got into quite a discussion, both being Jersey girls. So,
Mm.
you know, just I think that the first thing out of my mouth wasn't, "I'm the biggest Beatles fan in
No,
the
no,
world,"
no, no. You
and it
kept it.
wasn't that it was talking about his wife. He was very engaged at that point. Said, "Oh, you're from Jersey,"
Mm.
and then he says, "Whereabouts?" And I said, "Actually, not very far from where Nancy's family is from." And Andy, you'll appreciate this because he started doing geography. He says, "Oh, are you from Metuchen, or Plainfield?" Or I said, "Well, just a couple towns closer, Scotch Plains." And he says, "I think we pass a sign for that on the way out there." And I'm like, "Well, you would,
Yeah.
Of course, extended the invitation. You're ever driving through Scotch Plains, you need a place just to
Hey, man, where was that diner he popped into that time a couple of years
That
ago?
was Basking Ridge, and that
Right.
I used to live there ages ago, but yes, I did live in Basking Ridge. But anyway, so that was kind of a good icebreaker. And then, in my head, it's got to be like the kid in The Exorcist. Inside, it's got to be doing 360s, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We sit down, to sit where we've got everything set up, and he says, "Well, they tell me you really like Tug of War," and I said, "What? That's not true." He's like it kind of gave him that little hiccup of a thought. He's like, "What?" I said,
Right.
"I don't really like Tug of War. Love Tug of War." Okay, so got that little bug out of the way up front, and
Right.
look, it's easy when you're telling the truth. You only got to remember one story. I said, I remember buying that album. I was in college at the time, working at a record store. On the way home from school that day, stopped at the shop and picked it up and took it home. And it was unlike any other McCartney album for me in one very big sense. Every McCartney album I've bought, regardless of where I hold it in its stead now, one of my favorites, not one of my favorites, somewhere in the middle or anything else, always had to listen and go, "I'm going to come back to that one. That one, I think I like that one. Or let me go back and hear that one. I've got to see what's going on there." This thing, start to finish, in 45 minutes, I said, "This is my favorite Paul McCartney album." It immediately hooked me, every song.
Mhm.
So and it has stood, like a lot of, even certainly, Beatles songs, Lennon songs, Harrison songs, Ringo songs. I go through my phases of favorites, right? Oh
We
yeah,
all
we all have, for that matter. I go through, phases of who's my favorite Beatle, right? This one hasn't budged from that spot. So this was an album I was really, really eager to talk to him about, and
Mhm.
that it had so many good Beatle connections to it really gave us a really rich interview to cycle through and use parts of on the Beatles channel for purposes other than the Tug of War anniversary.
right.
I mean, for
Right.
example, we're um, when I said general questions at the top, I said, there's a lot of recurring theme of conflict and resolution in a lot of the songs. Did you write that intentionally, or did they just come about that way? And he said, "Well, I think a lot of that had to do with me being a Gemini, duality and twin."
Mm.
And he, think about it: ebony and ivory, black and
Mhm.
white,
Yeah.
tug of war, pushing, pulling.
All
And
that.
Right.
in my head, I'm going, and I can play that clip every time we play "Hello Goodbye."
Yeah. You can
Right?
apply it to a bunch of different songs. Yeah.
Right, but "Hello Goodbye," I mean, that's the ultimate duality, right? So
Right.
I said, there's going to be a lot to multi-purpose here. In my head, I'm trying to do that and focus on, and so I never have to say at any point, "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Because I
Oh,
wasn't paying attention, right? Trying to avoid that at all costs. So that kind of set the tone for it. And then we went track by track, and that's when the stories just started flowing. I mean,
Right.
Because you really went track by track. You had an hour. You went from Tug of War. You're not playing the songs, but you're just going through. Now, when you talk about the tracks, you lumped a couple of them together. Now, is that how? But did you go sequentially through the album, like 1 through 12, or did you keep those couplings of the songs the way that the interview presents it? Still, is that how it came about?
a little bit of both, Andy. So, made a little wink and a nod as to, wow, the first 2 songs in a medley on a Paul McCartney album. Where have I heard that done before?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But but then it was sequential. The only time I coupled them up was for The Pound Is Sinking
And Dress
and
Me
Dress
Up.
Me Up,
Dress Me Up.
The Robber,
Right.
because those, I said, they're very much in that Uncle Albert vein, where they're little parts, they're like little mini symphonies with different parts. And he talked about how those came about. So that was the only time I went out of order, because I said I'd like to just talk about how you do
Right.
little patchworks, that seem to somehow at the end make sense. And he made light of that too. He says, huh, glad they make sense to you.
But
Um,
even a song that, I know we're skipping around the album a little, but even a song that some McCartney fans might see as a kind of a track that's not as worthy as some of the other meteor tracks on the album. A track like Get It, that's got Carl Perkins on it, and the stories that he told because he was working with Carl Perkins, man, really resonate. Like that's an important track. We're not. Oh, it's not Wanderlust or Take It Away, but that's got his hero on that track.
well, that was the angle for that, right? In other words, the questions weren't, what do you think of this track? Do you like it or not like
No.
it? Each one of them. That one I actually started with a statement. I remember it vividly because I wanted to consciously make this point, and I made a statement rather than a question. I said, Paul, it's been said that if you're looking for something new to go listen to, something to turn you on, go to the people you like and see what turned them on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thanked him. I said, so I want to thank you for turning me
Right.
on to Carl Perkins many years ago. And he just he got a little disarmed, like, wow, that's cool. Like he thought that was cool that, that he was passing down. He says, oh, all the Beatles loved Carl. And I said, well, yeah, it's a great song. And he comes down to Montserrat and we talk about Get It. And he then took it down the My Old Friend road. He told the My Old Friend story.
Oh, he did. Yeah.
Love that story.
Yeah. And he told another one that, it was the night before Carl was leaving. They went to a party and they brought their guitars to do a little bit of, a little bit of jamming and, lead some sing-alongs and stuff at the party. And Carl had asked him, what should I play? And Paul said, do the new one. Do the new one. People like that. And Paul then starts singing it a cappella, and your listeners will have to pardon this, but so he goes, oh, so Carl sat there with his guitar and he went, on the Isle of Montserrat, no, I never will forget. And he forgot, and he forgot. We'll do Blue Suede Shoes. But he talked about what a great guy Carl was and how much he meant to all the Beatles. So, we didn't so much talk about the song other than it was the focal point of that phase of the album, but it was more a conversation about Carl and how, among other things, this album did was contribute to my love of Carl Perkins.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to ask. We've heard the Here Today story, often. Now, when you get into that kind of situation, I mean, it's got to be different when you're face to face. I mean, you hear the story, but when you're like face to face with him, talk about his emotions. Does he still get emotional with talking with John? Did you notice any of that when you were talking with him?
Yeah, I did. And the general story, that he wrote it as if John were there and they were having a conversation.
Right.
But he really took it end to end, like from when he heard the news to having the conversation. But then he told what some of those stories were about in the song, like The Night We Cried, and funny stories. Oh, we were getting drunk, and
we were in Jacksonville on tour, I think. Right?
Yeah. The weather canceled the shows, so we went to this place and we got drunk. And he says, and then we threw up.
I like that part.
He says, but he says, but that was when, again, it's a different time. is 50 plus years, removed. He's telling it 50 plus years removed. He says, guys didn't talk, particularly British guys didn't talk to each other like that. Like, I love, that, what I mean in my life and stuff. And that resonated with a lot of people who heard this. So before we aired the whole special, we aired our promo team, who does a great job, took a little sample of it and put it on our website and said, hey, coming Friday night, you'll hear this interview and here's a little taste. And it got picked up by a couple of services and some of the other, print outlets like Rolling Stone and people. Paul McCartney discusses John in new interview. It got picked up by, a couple of the wire services and ended up overseas that, this new Paul McCartney interview on SiriusXM, had Paul talking about John. And that was certainly very, very rewarding. It was great, Tom, to your point, even there were points in some of the stories that I knew. So yes, I knew I sat with my guitar, tell my troubles to the guitar, and have a conversation with John. I got great advice from an absolute mentor, not only in radio, but he's just truly one of the most important people in my life. My best friend, Lou Simon. He said, Tom, whatever story he tells, a lot of them. He says, but one, let's get one thing straight. He knows more of them than you do. But two, even if it's a story you've heard 1,000 times, it's the first time he's telling it to you.
To you, yeah.
And that was such simple yet sage advice. And fortunately, there were a bunch of stories I didn't hear that day. I didn't hear that he dreamed up yesterday. I didn't hear any of those. But you know what? There was a reason. It's because I didn't ask, how did you write yesterday? Right? We had a very focused agenda talking about this particular album. That did not prevent him from going into Beatleland. I mean, at the end of the day, the following names and or topics get tossed around. Okay, George Martin, Jeff Emerick, and John and Ringo. Right. No way they couldn't come up, right?
Right.
Brian Epstein comes in. That's odd.
Well,
George Harrison comes in. Right. George Harrison's parents come in. All right, hang on here.
Yeah, ballroom dancing.
Yes, yeah. Julia Lennon gets in there. There's a lot of connective tissue there, in those backstories that he told.
Right.
The one about George's parents on Ballroom Dancing, yes. When he told that story about George's parents being the lead dancers at this social hall, I never knew that, never read that anywhere. Mm-hmm. So one, it's not just that it's fresh meat for the radio, but the radio head in me is going, you realize George sang that song, I'm Happy Just to Dance with You. You know what I'm gonna cue up every time I play that song, right? I'm gonna play that little clip. It was brilliant the way he linked it all together.
That was a great segment. Great segment.
Yeah, and again, the strains and connecting to the Beatles story on this album particularly, is very evident because it's the first album after John. So you're going to get all of these strains coming together. Brian Epstein, and everything that you've just mentioned, Ringo, George, all coming together into this album, which is why he's probably so, close with it. He loves it. And the fact that you actually had the foresight to say, I'd like to talk about this year. Will they go for it? And you had a chance to talk about it, and we're so appreciative that you did, because it was a real interview talking about real songs on an album, and going through all of them. In one of them, we learned a lot more about when we read the Legacy book, Volume 2.
Yeah.
And right here,
where we all hold it up.
Wanderlust and Wanderlust, which we knew was about a pot bust, right?
Oh my God!
But the story about, obviously it's in great detail in this book with Alan and Adrian. Sure. But even just with your interview with him, he goes, well, we didn't like that one, and we like this one, and that was a great part of the interview too.
Yeah, and I felt, I had to. I mean, there's no way he didn't catch on that I was a pretty big fan, right? That one, I remember starting the questions off saying, all right, I've avoided any kind of hearsay and rumor, whatever else. But, it's been reported not by you, but
Yes.
I've read it in a lot of places, that you had considered having George on there. And he didn't, he said, look, any record would be better with George on it, right? But he
I
said,
don't.
not
No.
not specifically. I
Right.
said, okay, well, good. Steve Hoffman's board, wherever that thing appears, we can now put that one to bed.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Because you see those Polaroids, you see, John, George, and George Martin, and you're assuming because he's also there to do all those years ago.
Yep.
So you're also assuming that he's going to put on the slide guitar for Wanderlust. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So good
I
job.
think that kind of gave whoever had that premise, whoever kicked out the thing off said, well, it could have happened. I mean, just time wise, it fits in the timeline, sure,
Hmm.
but no go, no go. So we took care of we squashed one rumor. Good. We got some backstories we never heard. Certainly, I never heard. And it's it really went to him making it that much easier. I mean, it could have been like the question most people asked me with this was, weren't you just so nervous? I'm like, I wasn't. He made me very, very at ease. Again, the whole let's make this a conversation, not an interrogation, worked on both ends. And it's a subject I'm obviously very passionate about, and I think he appreciated that it wasn't going to be. What was it like doing the Ed Sullivan Show?
Yeah, of course. You're,
You
you're
know,
talking about one of his own solo albums with a very knowledgeable professional like person like yourself on the air doing this thing, and he's not doing an interview with a regular journalist where he has to go into that memory bank and give stock answers. He's actually providing you with context, and answers with meaning and feel, going through all these things, and going into an album. Because how many times has Paul McCartney, after an album has been released and the initial promotion has died down, when does he go back to it? Hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
Right. And you got a chance to do that on this anniversary, which is, it was, again, you rehearsed it. You said, I've been ready for 40 years, but
Yeah.
here you are. You walked into the room, you did the interview, and you sound cool, calm, and collected the whole way through.
Well, yeah, the drinking helped, no question. No, not true, not true. When I knew it was really, I don't know, where I knew we had settled into some sort of, let's keep bullshitting just you and me. Am I allowed to curse on this thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking about a particular song, and he starts to give his answer, and he kicks back in his chair, crosses his legs, he unties his shoes and gets himself real comfortable, takes his shoes off. And I'm thinking, should I be taking my shirt off? What's the next move here? But I think it was either, maybe they have a camera there that says, if he takes his shoes off, it means he's not planning on leaving.
Right.
What I had to, of course, my program director, Adam Saltzman, said, now remember, we call you the Beatles expert, but if he says something and you don't think it's right, remember he knows more about the Beatles than you. I got it. So no, there was no need for any sort of corrections. I think they had a pool going back at the studio, though, as to how long into the interview would it be before either
Correct them.
that or he said, all right, I've had enough of this, get me out of here.
No.
It was only one time, and by the way, he came around kind of on it, which was funny. We were talking about the song Somebody Who Cares, the ballad side
right.
one, and I said, Paul, you wrote that one at the sessions as opposed to the others you brought to the sessions, because you wanted to have somebody, you want to have something fresh for when Stanley Clarke and everybody got down there, right? And he said, well, Tom, he says, I'm not sure. He says, the thing is, I've written so many songs and people will ask me, Paul, what year did you write this song? And I tell them, I don't know, but, and then like taps me, he goes, don't worry, I tell him I know somebody who does.
That's a great part. He goes, I don't know, but somebody does.
Somebody does.
And he tapped you.
And when we got to the next song, What's That You're Doing? I couldn't help but say, you've got Steve Gadd and Ringo, and you end up doing the drumming.
Yeah.
Great groove. And he says, I don't know. He says, I have it in my mind that was Stevie. Okay.
Right.
not going to fight with him. And I said, you were there. I was. And I said, I'm going my way on the album. He says, no, I have it in my mind. It was Stevie. And I think I kind of got him back on track when I said, I thought it was Stevie on Ebony and Ivory and you on What's That You're Doing, which is, at least according to the album notes, that's what it is. So he goes, we start talking about it. And he's like, yeah, well, Stevie came down and he's so in the groove and so in the pocket. He says,
this is great.
And he goes, yeah, and there's a great, beat. He goes, maybe it was me. So we've gone from, I don't think it's me, to maybe it was me. And at the end, he says, I hope it was me because it's really good, So we went, we had 3 stages where I think I got him to believe it. And again, he would know better than me.
Is that the song where he said Stevie's telling him, Paul, you got to stay in the pocket.
Oh, that was on Ebony and Ivory when they were doing Flick Track.
Right? Yes.
You're not in the pocket.
You're not in the pocket, man.
Yeah, and he says, oh, Stevie. He says, when he played it back, and I wasn't. He says, I was like a millisecond off, but his hearing is so good, right. And he says, no, you're not in the pocket, man. And he said, but he copped to it. He said, and he was right. I was like a millisecond off. And he says, and we redid it, So he had such great things to say about all the players, about not just Stevie and Carl Perkins and Ringo, of course.
But he didn't talk about how long it took Stevie to get there, though, did he?
Oh, he did not.
Right, no. Another person he talked very highly of too is, and I knew they were friends, but I didn't know how long they knew each other. Was John Hurt, actor John Hurt, and for the appearing in the "Take It Away" video. So I'm glad that came out too, because I didn't realize that they knew him for so long and into the the mid '60s.
Yeah. So talking about that, and remember 82 MTV it's a new thing. Yeah. He'd been making videos for 15 years, but they made that great video for Take It Away. And I said, wow, you got John Hurt. How'd that come about? Right. And he told the story that Brian Epstein, enter Brian into the story.
Right.
Took us to go see this play, Little Malcolm and His Struggle Against the Eunuchs.
The Eunuchs. That sounds interesting.
Right. A title like that, you got to go find out what that's about. He took us backstage and we met him and we became friends and stayed friends and over the years. And then he put the bow around it, saying, so when I had this role about a band manager going to check out a band, I immediately thought of Brian. How could he not? He says, and it reminded me of John. And I called him, and that's how that happened. And it's a great story. It's great fodder. It's great radio. And pointing it out at the end, he said, "Yeah, Little Malcolm and Struggling Against Unity. You got to go find out." He says John was great in that, and I said, "Yeah, he was actually very good in the film version of that on Apple Films." And I got that little. Like, this could have been the moment where he said, all right, rabbit hole. No, and he
that was the fanboy right there.
Yeah. And he said, you're right. Like, he knew that intellectually, right? But it's buried.
It's buried. It's not buried. It's not going to be up here where all his other answers are ready to go.
Right. I mean, like, had I done in that, outline that I sent, if I had said, oh, I want to talk about John Hurt being in the video because he also was in Little Malcolm and the Struggle Against the Eunuchs on Apple Films. Right. If I had done that, he'd go, oh, yeah, he was. And it would be far less interesting.
Yes, it was better that it came out unscripted.
Yeah. And I think that might have been when the shoes came off, that he was comfortable enough to stick around for the rest of the hour. The rest of the hour, I've got it, the last thing. I wouldn't do it. No offense. I wouldn't do it to you guys. I wouldn't do it to him. I wouldn't do it to anybody. Like, oh, we got an hour. Let me just see. Oh, yeah, I got another 20 minutes of it. No, I didn't want to be looking at my watch, of course, but an hour with him is going to go pretty fast. And again, knowing,
how'd you keep track of it? Like, it was in your head? How'd you do it?
The accountant in me is saying, we'll do it symmetrically and chronologically. 3 general at the front, 3 general at the back, and 4 minutes apiece for each song or whatever that came out to. When you get to here today, well, one, here's the good news. He's going to tell you some great stories. Here's more good news. The album is exactly halfway over at that point.
Mm.
It was 2:30. I knew I was on pace, and we were right about there, which was good. So I knew, that we had paced this correctly up to that point. Again, the last thing I wanted to do was either A, be looking at my watch, or B, have them come in when I have to, because they said it and they were as polite as could be. Look, please respect that it's an hour. It's not 65 minutes. It's not, oh, when we get to the hour, oh, I just have 2 more questions, or gee, can he stick around for 15 minutes? It's not that. He's busy guy. They said, you got an hour. You do whatever you want, but it's an hour. So, by that point, I knew where we'd have to be by getting to that song, by getting to here today at the 30-minute
mark with another side to go.
I
Tom,
mean,
were there any questions that you didn't ask him that you wanted to?
No, actually. In fact, I carved out at the end, we were doing a Linda McCartney show. Bill Flanagan, one of my co-hosts on the Fab Forum, was putting together a Linda McCartney tribute for her birthday. It was September. And he said, like, here's a list of questions. If you can ask Paul to comment on this stuff, I could really pepper I'm like, dude, that's an hour there. I got to do the
Right.
But I got him. I carved out a few minutes at the end to say, look, I know this could be an all-day thing, but we're doing this, special about Linda, and tell us about her as a bandmate, a life mate, the cook of the house. Tell us what we, and he said, gee, we could be here all day, but he gave us a couple of great, quick stories, and that was the last 5 minutes of it.
About Linda.
Yeah. So, I got through my whole, selfishly, yes, I made sure I got to all my questions before I got the bills, but we had timed it quite literally that the last question of being about Tug of War, again, he's the consummate pro, right? I don't know if he knew that we were at the 59.5-minute mark, right? But his last answer was, well, whatever it was, it ended with, because sometimes life can be a tug of war.
Tug of war. I noticed that too. It's like cut.
Mic drop. Right. Done. We're done, right? Yeah. Literally on the tape that I have, or tape, the file that I have of it, quite literally, after he says that, and I say, gee, this has been great, the next words out of his mouth are, we're just finishing up, Jeff. Literally, we hit the 60-minute mark as Jeff came in to get him. And I said, we got about I said, got a minute here. I said, can you just, a couple of quick things, a photo for the website when we promote it? Sure. I said, can you read this one-liner? And this was one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. Nice big letters. Hi, this is Paul McCartney here with Tom Frangione on the Beatles Channel. Okay. Very simple.
Here, and here's that photo right now.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
There they are.
The story with the liner is he reads it and he says, hey, this is Paul McCartney here with Tom Frangione on the Beatles Channel. And he stops and he says, did I pronounce your name right? He says, because if I didn't, I will do it again. And I said, actually, you did pronounce it right. In Italian, for all the paisans out there, out in Two Legs land, you pronounce every letter, right? And I had said, it's like Don Corleone, Don Corleone. I said, in Italian, you pronounce every letter. And he went right back into Linda land. He said, I probably got that from her because she was a great cook. And then he started doing the whole Italian thing with, so she make a de mozzarella frangione. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God, right? So with that, we have a good chuckle. And we're going to end on a very good and friendly note. And that photo that you just showed of us holding the Tug of War album, I've got, it was a brand new copy. I literally took the cellophane off it in front of him. That's how new. And of course, after the photo, I said, now that I've opened it, would you mind defacing it? Of course. And, you've seen when Paul signs, he signs, to Andy, cheers, Paul McCartney.
Yes.
No, in mine, he wrote to Tom. And then in ginormous block letters, "Hey, Frangione, Paul McCartney," and dated it. And I said, now that is a one of a kind. It
Absolutely.
is a one of a kind.
What do you think the chances are that you'll be able to do something like this again in the future for another album?
Well, interestingly, we actually were trying to get something for this year for Venus and Mars. It is a big round anniversary.
Right.
We didn't do something for Band on the Run. Again, try and remember, just dial it back. This is for radio. This is for SiriusXM. We have a lot of material for Band on the Run, right? We have the disc
Hmm.
that came in the anniversary box and things.
Oh God, yeah.
There's
Right.
the open end. There was the open end interview from '73. There's enough to build radio around. So you don't want to do this over and over and over. You want it to be special. So we're hoping this year to do something with Venus and Mars. It's unsure, but this would be a great one to do.
It would, and you had a lot of Band on the Run leftovers with one hand clapping this in
Sure.
2024. So
Yeah.
that was enough to kind of. So now this would be something new for the channel to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's to be determined. But
Yeah.
the other is, boy, I hope you guys are wanting this as bad as I do, for the archive box series to resume, because if, let's say, London Town and Back to the Egg were to be teed up, that would be an opportunity, right? Whether it's an anniversary or not, just to say we could do a
Right.
London Town sit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So put it this way: if they want to do it, I'd volunteer. Don't you worry about that.
Oh, of course, of
And
course.
that would
I
be
tend to think that. Sorry,
Tom.
go ahead, Andy.
Go ahead.
No,
No, I was just
I-
going
I
to say
tend
that
to
I think it's that it's going to come back. It's been it's over 4 years now since we've had one.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that it's not done. I think they will be resumed. I think my co-host thinks it's dead on the vine.
I think it's
don't
over.
I don't think it's over. I think we're going to get those last two Wings albums.
We talked with Lawrence and Steve at the fest about that and said, any luck? And they said, well, they both said, no secret. We did interviews for it. They have
Right.
the show from Glasgow to throw in there if they want to. There's certainly enough outtakes. But apparently it's not like they forgot, okay, that Back to the Egg and London Town had come out. Again, they've done interviews for the booklets and things, so we want to hope that would happen. But it's kind of weird, when you see some of the turns the Paul McCartney releases have taken over the past year, like the
Right.
one hit clapping, and even the Band on the
Well,
Run.
and
You're getting these kind of niche, smaller releases of like smaller archive stuff or the
Yeah.
half speed. Like, you're getting one hand clapping, and you're getting these smaller. They're nice.
Underdubbed. Yeah,
The underdubbed was
Yeah.
another project. One hand clapping. So these are not massively big archival boxes. So you wonder what the marketing team has
I
decided
think
what to
that's
do.
the wave of the future. I think that's the wave of the future. These smaller releases, they're less expensive. I listen. I see a lot of people complain about the prices of those box sets throughout the years, especially on the Hoffman forum. People were not necessarily happy about how much they were charging for those box sets.
Well, you had to get them when they came out.
Yeah, no, I didn't find them unreasonable. Again, if you bought it at Amazon and got the pre-purchase discount and all that stuff,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, no, they weren't terrible. But boy, you see what they go for on now that they're, I guess, out of print or
Yes.
the run is
Yes.
over or whatever. There's a lot of money there for sure.
Speaking of Tug of War, did you get the blue acrylic case one that's kind of limited edition? There was like
No, I mean, even I I looked at that and said it was like, I forget what the dollar difference was for an acrylic photo, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not sure that I need that upcharge. I'm just not sure I need that. It's kind of like, look, that last Mind Games thing. That set was like $1,100 or something, right? To get the that big
Yeah.
4-pound.
You didn't
it's a
get
big-
it?
it's a granite.
You didn't
Yeah.
get it?
No, I didn't. I got, and here's the sad part, Andy, is if it had 10 seconds more of unreleased music, I probably would have done it.
Oh,
Because what am I going to stop now? Right? I bought the Harrison songs
The
by.
great-
No, I didn't do the ones from the '90s, the songs by George Harrison. I'm like, I
Oh.
know and back then it was a fortune, $400, right? We're going to pay $400 to get 4 songs that'll be bootlegged in 10 seconds, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But no,
Yeah, well,
it was a legitimate release of some music they made, and that's kind of what I collect.
No, it was, and no, it's been great. It's been great talking about this this interview and this experience. Is it still available on demand on SiriusXM?
Right now, no. What we're doing is we're kind of retooling the entire app, trying to get more traffic to the app. So certain shows may not repeat as often as they used to. Oh, you want to go here this week's whatever, Way Beyond Compare? It's there on the app. They're rebuilding that archive. The interview with Paul, here's what you can do. One, write to SiriusXM and say this should be, forever and always, played every day of the week. No, don't do that. We'll play it probably around his birthday. I've played it at the Fest for Beatles Fans, where one of our team, Natalie Palumbo, a graphic and visual effects artist, put together an absolutely incredible video accompaniment. The story there was, Mark Lapidus, a dear friend and the producer of the fest, when he heard the interview, he said 2 things. One, he says, that interview is going to win an award. And I'm very proud and pleased to say that the special that we made out of the interview won an international radio award, which was
awesome,
just phenomenal. But he also said, I want to play this at the fest. And, for those of you who have been to the fest, I said, all right, look, I'll get permission, always ask permission because, Sirius owns it. I don't. They said, yeah, go ahead. And, what's the downside, right? I said, well, I don't see one, but what if we did this rather than play the special? What if I play the uncut interview? So here's what happens. If you are a SiriusXM subscriber, there's interview material here you haven't heard, okay, because it wasn't in the special. If you're not a SiriusXM subscriber, well, guess what? It's all new to you, okay? And if you're a subscriber who missed it altogether, well, here's your chance. So I said, all right, that's all good, Mark. It runs an hour, but we're just going to play it through the speakers. I said, I would hate this to happen. It's in a darkened room. You're hearing 2 people talk about an album. I said, this is what I'm afraid that this is going to happen all night. People they'll be checking phones. I said, got to do something. I tried to put together a visual presentation for it. I'm not a visual graphics artist. It looked like an accountant put it together because guess what? That's what I am by trade, right? It was very symmetrical and very literal and everything. And I said, no, this is even worse. I roped Natalie into this. She's an amazing talent, super easy to work with, and has great Beatles sensibilities. And I'll give you just my favorite example in the whole thing. Tom, you were talking about the John Hurt appearance in the video. When Paul starts talking about going to see John in the Little Malcolm play, she found a photograph of Paul and Brian in front of the marquee, appearing tonight in Little. I said,
no kidding.
Yeah, no. So she, in addition to all the visual effects, which are just visually captivating, she has great taste, great sensibilities, whatever, and made this thing come to life. So anyway, we play it at the fest. So even if it won't be a big feature thing, it will be in the video rooms. You can catch it there.
Yeah, it's been at the Fest 23. I think it was the first time you aired it was the Jersey Fest in 23. Then in Chicago, and then last year, and hopefully, again.
Yeah, and this year we've done the same thing for our interview with Jeff Britton. I got him for 50 minutes.
Yep, that's right.
Look, Paul McCartney, Jeff Britton. It's 2 different things, but Jeff was really, really good. So we're doing it for that. The McCartney interview, the Tug of War, will be one of the features at Beatles on the Beach. I'm going to be one of the MCs down there. That's coming up the first week in March. So we'll be playing it down there. If Beatles on the Beach is on your calendar, carve an hour out and you can come see that at that festival. So we're going to play it at things like that. I did it here even in my hometown, Scotch Plains. Our library does a series during the summer, I kind of get to know your interesting neighbors. And a gardening exhibition one night, and they asked me to do this, and we presented it there. So we will get it out there as best we can.
No, I think it should be celebrated, and everybody needs to see this because
fantastic.
not too often you get Paul McCartney to open up about one of his own solo albums and get somebody who's so as knowledgeable as you to talk to him and get him to really be engaged and answer these questions that are not just stock answers that he can just that he just usually comes to an interview with.
Yeah,
and you did your homework with this, and you had your hour, and you took every minute of it, and you prepared for it, and you actually asked him questions about a solo album, not a Beatle album, not a story that he can just an album that is so near and dear to your heart, as you told us. But most of us here feel the same way about Tug of War. I mean, and you've captured that interview and now added a visual element into it to be enjoyed forever.
The good news there was, of course I asked because Sirius owns the audio here, whether it's the uncut or the, what's been broadcast.
The published one, yeah.
So I told them what I wanted to do with the visual. And they said, sure, let us take a look at it. Okay, because we have, believe it or not, as a radio concern, we have video people, right? You ever see like a documentary about U2 and they're in the studio, they got their headphones on. And, well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from us videoing this. They said, we work with video people. Let's let them look at it. And they gave it to them and said, well, what do you think? And they said, you're going to show this at a Beatles convention? We said, yeah. And they said, well, shame on you. And we were like, oh my God, what? And they said, this needs to be seen by a whole lot more people than are going to that convention.
It's the truth.
So a copy of it now resides in the McCartney archive, which we're pleased as punch about. And our video folks, they work with, the Encore collection and Amazon and the Coda collection and, the places where you find all these kind of things. And if there's an outlet for it, it would just be an ultimate honor, to have it as part of that.
Well, again, I know it's 2 years ago now, but that is congratulations to you on that interview because
thank you so much.
No, it's something as McCartney fans we're like, yes, finally we got somebody who knows what they're talking about to ask him really good questions about a really good album.
Yeah.
Like I remember the channel promoting this interview and I'm like, I don't care what I'm doing on a Friday night at 9:00 when that drops, I'm all in and I'm listening to it. And I listened to it again recently. It was awesome. And thank you so much for the work that you did on that. It was awesome.
Like I said, that's, as I said at the top, on the list of days of my life that sucked, this one wasn't on it,
It wasn't.
I remember, when just leaving that day, after we said our goodbyes, right? I'm, look, the tape is now not running and, the guy is unplugging things and we're literally walking out. And now comes the moment of truth. What do you say? Hey, catch you next time? No, you've got it. There has to be something, right? And it's too big an opportunity not to. And if I could roll up my sleeve, you'd see the hair standing up on my arm just thinking about this. I said, Paul, I know you hear this from a lot of people, but your music has been at every part. It's influenced every part of my life, professionally, personally, socially, romantically. I said, I just can't imagine my life, much less a world, without your music in it. And he saw that I was choking up as I was saying that. And he came in and in my head, I'm going, all right, I've done that. And I got the liner, I got the autograph, I got the photo, I got the interview. And I said this, this thing about, not imagining a world without his music. And he came in and I got the Beatle hug. And I'm like, oh, we are so done here. We are so done right now. As I said, he could not have been, for lack of a better term, nicer. He was all those things I mentioned before, smart and funny.
Because at the end of the day, he's just a regular guy.
Yeah.
Right.
He's just a regular guy that you want to shoot the shit with.
And you're right, Tom. I mean, he's impacted. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's exactly what it was. It was just it was a relaxed conversation, and that I think came through in the interview. That
Right.
it was focused yet relaxed.
And as you said, you
Yeah.
wanted it to be a conversation, not an interrogation, and that is
Right.
exactly what that interview is.
Yeah. Go
Yep.
ahead, Tom.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's the music has impacted all of us, and I'm sure, like you said, he's heard it a million times. But at the end of the day, I think that's what he's got to be most proud of is just how how his music has impacted all of us. Screw all the critics that have just shit on him throughout the decades. I
Right,
don't, I know he cares a little bit about that, but he's got to be so proud
right.
of people, like you coming up to him saying, "Hey, look, man," and we got to live during his time.
Oh,
How awesome is that?
and he actually talked about the critics. He says, and because I asked him, you look in the rearview mirror, where do you place this one? And he said, believe it or not, after we make the record, we don't sit back for a year and say, wow, that was good.
Right,
He says you go on to the next thing. And he said something again where they figuratively they had to pick me up off the floor. He says, but when somebody like you says this album was really, really good and it meant a lot, he says, because of this, I'll go back and listen to that
Mm-hmm.
album
right,
again and say, yeah, that was good or whatever. And he says, and even if the critics don't like, I said, well, the critics love this one. I said, I mean, I remember, Rolling Stone, gave it whatever, the 5-star review or whatever, but
right.
remember it because it stuck out because it seemed to be, I felt like, well, now I know what my father must have felt like when he got the report cards that said, we know he can do the work, but he's,
Right, right.
no, the Rolling Stone review, and which is in the book in the deluxe set, starts
Yes.
with something
Mm,
along the lines of, "This is the album we always knew Paul
we all
McCartney,"
knew, yes,
and it
yep,
ends with, "It leaves the rest of his catalog, including Band on the Run, in the dust."
Was that the article by Stephen Holden? I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And look, you know what's wrong with Band on the Run? Nothing. Okay, it's a
nothing.
great record. It's a great record. It is. I mean, what superlatives do you use for Band on the Run? But I guess the only thing that ever gives me a nervous tick when I hear Band on the Run is when Paul has a new album out and they say it's his best since Band
Since
on
Band
the
on the
Run.
Run, and you're like,
Since,
right. Oh yeah,
I get
no,
that
no,
nervous tick.
no,
I
no,
won't
no.
lie to you. Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Awesome,
Right.
awesome. Well, great conversation. Well, Tom
Yep.
Frangione of the Beatles Channel, thank you for being here tonight. It's been a wonderful interview, telling us the story and the history of how this came together to do this legendary, once in a lifetime opportunity to interview Paul
Yeah.
on the anniversary, talking about Tug of War. You, of course, my friend, will be at the, as you said, Beatles at the Beach in early March.
Yep.
But all of us here in this area will be at the Fest for Beatles
Yep.
Fans at the end of March in Jersey City. And Tom is Master of Ceremonies / MC, and he'll be there all weekend, and we will too. So not a lot of details to come out still about that and schedules and times, but Tom will be there, and he does the trivia stuff. He does Name That Tune. So he will be there. We'll be there too. And Tom, we're looking forward to seeing you at the fest.
Oh, look for me. I'll be the guy wearing the two
Yeah,
legs
can't wait.
t-shirt.
We're gonna get you a white one this year too.
Oh, the
The
positive.
road.
Wait,
No, I call them home and away
Yes.
jerseys. We're gonna give you an away jersey.
No.
Run
This
away.
is Tug of War, the duality thing. I've got
Okay.
the black with the
Yes,
white lettering.
yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, we'll get the ebony and ivory thing going.
You got it nailed, man. It'll
Yeah.
be perfect.
We'll have a white shirt for you in Jersey City in a few weeks' time. We're looking forward to it. So
I'll look forward to it. We'll see you guys in March. Thanks for having me. This was a blast. It's a day I will never forget,
Great.
certainly, and one that I enjoy talking to folks who can appreciate it. I enjoy talking about it.
Awesome. So for Tom
Thank you.
Frangione, for
Thank
Tom Hunyadi, this has been episode 272 of Two Legs, and we'll see you next time.